Hey everybody, Sam here. Today I'm going to do a quick run through some of the books in my library dealing with the Great European Witch Hunt, a very important and tragic series of events that happened in Europe that did a lot to shape gender relations, early capitalism, and also that are very significant in women's history and uh, the history and mythology of the modern witchcraft revival. Now, I'll warn you, I'm going to go through both some primary documents and also some scholarly work. There's been an enormous amount of not particularly good scholarship and what verges on fantasy writing around this topic, and I'm not going to deal with any of that. I'm interested in giving you some idea of where you can find out what really happened, get some idea of what the events were, what the issues were, and so on. So rather than just ramble on, let me just get to it. The first thing I'm going to do is talk about this book, the Arras Witch Treatises, edited and translated by Andrew Gow, Robert Desjardins, and Francois Pageau, published, let's see, 2016 by Pennsylvania State University. This is a translation and some discussion of a very early witch hunter's manual. It's in 1460. A guy called Johann Tincter, who lived in what's now northern France, southern Belgium, in the Burgundian territories, witnessed and probably participated in an early trial of witches. Now, witchcraft trials, witchcraft was considered by the church at the time to be a delusion, that people who thought that they were witches were probably just mentally ill. And so for there to be a trial of a witch as a heretic was really outside of the law of the time. So Johann Tincter, who was a lawyer, wrote a legal justification for starting up witch hunts, which was very influential in the earliest stages of the witch hunt. And so here's his justification, as well as an account of the trial, what the witch hunters thought was going on, their examination of the accused, and so on, from the very beginning of the witch persecutions in Europe. A chilling but a very, very valuable document. In something of the same vein, here's the most famous of the witch hunter's manual, the Malleus Maleficarum, written by Heinrich, Kramer, and James Sprenger, and this version is translated with an introduction by Reverend Montague Summers. Yeah, there were many witch hunters' manuals. This happens to be the best known. It's really quite fascinating, the weird sexual perverse notions that are included in this. This is where the famous accusation that witches, who in Kramer and Sprenger's mind were virtually all women, collected collected the penises of men and kept them alive as pets. That was one of the one of the strange things in here. But at any rate, this was a very influential manual. Um, Came about around the time when printing became a large um, a large thing, and so yeah, worth having as a reference book. Really, I wouldn't. I certainly don't credit it as a credible source. Um, a fascinating book, by the way, Male Witches in Early Modern Europe, by Laura Apps and Andrew Gow, published 2003, Manchester University Press. Um, although there's although there's the feminist recapturing of witchcraft and the view that witchcraft accusations were almost exclusively misogynist. In fact, witches were seen as a category of heretics, and many of the people who were accused, tried, convicted, and executed were men, a minority. It depending on which area of Europe you were in. In Iceland, for example, 90% of the witches were male. In some other areas, there was a majority of men. On the whole, it was about 15, 20%, something like that, maybe a bit more. But this book examines a number of the witch hunters' manuals, a lot of the trial transcripts, and other material, with a specific eye to how whether the gendered argument holds water or not, whether male witches were accused and convicted in the same way as female witches, and so on. A very useful book. And this one, which is a collection of even more recent scholarship, Witchcraft and Masculinities in Early Modern Europe, from Palgrave Macmillan, which means unfortunately is an expensive book, 2009. It's an anthology of research papers and documents from various parts of Europe, from the Duchy of Lorraine, the Holy Roman Empire, different parts of France, Italy, Scotland, England, and it's a really quite fascinating book, because they talk about possession, trance, werewolf, and witchcraft accusations, the ways that different male witches were accused and treated in different parts of Europe. An interesting read, worth a read. Now, one of the most interesting and of course strongly feminist books, Caliban and the Witch, Women, the Body, and Primitive Accumulation by Silvia Federici. I think this is probably a must-read if you're interested in this topic in general. It's published by Atano Media in 2004. Federici is a Marxist feminist, and her argument is that the witch persecutions in Europe and also in the various parts of the empires came out of the need in early capitalism to accumulate wealth in the hands of a small number of people. The expropriation of the wealth of the common people, the community at large, but much of this was held in women's hands. It was traditional female authority over the common ground, over agriculture, over home production, and pre-capitalist merchandising, and so on. And in order to establish capitalism, you needed to put all of that money and all of that property in the hands of a small number of people. And so Federici argues that the witch persecutions and the gendered, splitting the peasantry and the working class on the basis of gender was an essential part of this process. Really, quite a good book, quite a fascinating book. So, on the level, the micro level, there's a couple of very good books that deal with the witch persecutions and how they worked in particular areas. Let's see, Witches and Neighbours by Robin Briggs. Deals with the witch persecutions in small towns in Lorraine, northern France. What's fascinating in his book is how he talks about how long-standing differences inside small communities exploded into these witchcraft persecutions. He also debunks a couple of the myths that have gone around about witches. For example, the midwives and local magic users, the what do you call them, wise women and cunning men, they were much more likely to accuse people of witchcraft or to call for the witch hunters than to be witches or accused as witches. Part of their role was to act as magical guardians of their communities, and so certainly their job would include protecting the community against witchcraft. This is published by HarperCollins, 1996. It's an older book, but it's a very good deep dig into how the persecutions happened in individual small communities. Excuse me. Another scholar who's done a bunch of work specifically in northern Italy is Carlo Ginzburg. His book, The Night Battles, Witchcraft and Agrarian Cults in the 16th and 17th Centuries, which is published by Johns Hopkins University Press, at least in this translation, 2013, originally written in Italian in 1966. Very interesting. It's it's about the existence of a magical order in northern Italy called the Badanti, who engaged in trance battles against witches for the fertility of the land. He talks about how this agrarian cult had existed for quite some time, and how it gradually, with the pressure of the witchcraft persecutions, gradually they came to see themselves as being witches, much like the Northern European witches, although that wasn't the origin of this agrarian magical cult. Really interesting stuff. Substantial translated excerpts from the trial transcripts and that sort of thing, and a good read, an interesting read. This one, his later book, Ecstasies, Deciphering the Witch's Sabbath, goes into it. 1991, Random House, originally published in 1989 in Italian. This is a little bit more of a slog. It's once you get into it, it's not difficult, but it's a bit difficult to start the reading. He argues that there was a shamanic undertone to European culture that included the Badanti and other magical orders or practices that may have existed prior to Christianization in Europe. He also talks about various interesting historical things. The existence of a Jewish kingdom in what is now southern France for hundreds of years in the early Middle Ages. The parallels between the persecution of Jews, lepers, and witches. The details of the accusations that were made of them, poisoning wells, sacrificing babies, all that kind of garbage, were very, very similar. I mean, as we look at the current moral panic around transgender people, we can see, or the 1980s Great Satanic Witch Panic, you can see that these same kinds of accusations and parallels come up again and again. Interesting book, very well researched, well written, and a little bit of a slog academically, but quite good. And finally, The Witch in History by Diane Purkiss, published by Routledge, 1996. This is an interesting book because, among other things, Diane Purkiss argues against reclaiming the witch as a feminist icon. Says basically, look, it's a fictional fantasy trope. It doesn't reflect the actual experience of actual women, and it really is a sensational and exploitative history that does not benefit women. So Diane Purkiss is not impressed with much of the feminist witchcraft movement. So that's a very quick run through some of the stuff in my library. I'll make a list of all of the books down below, and we'll just have to do some more reading. Read, folks. It's good for you. Bye-bye now.